is the train depot, right, for the IGN railroad that came through Rockdale in its early history. Uh, this was built in 1906, although Rockdale's history goes back to 1874 with the railroad. This wasn't built until 1906. And so depots usually served as a stop along the way for passengers. I'm going to show you a few other places that are around this area that were hotels and places of entertainment for people as we go through the history of Rockdale. And so if you look a little bit over to my left, right over here, you see a blacksmith shop. And that was typically helping with the horses and other agricultural animals as well. So, Rockdale was founded basically upon the railroad. And with the history of Rockdale and its rivalry with another town in Milam County, Cameron, they were both vying for the railroad to go through here. Rockdale happened to win because the land that you see was perfect land for the railroad station to build their railroad at. And so Rockdale therefore became a major railroad intersection and helped with a lot of the different businesses that would spring up in Rockdale along that time. Alright, continue with us as we go look at some other famous historical places in Rockdale. Hi, welcome back to a little bit more of history from Rockdale. So as you, in this spot right here, right, although you can't tell now, back in 1880 there was built on this site the Mundine Hotel. They've since placed Texas Historical Commission has placed a marker here to commemorate where the hotel was. The Mundine Hotel lasted for roughly about 8 years. You can see, right, it's right across the street, right, from the train depot and the railroad station. And it would accommodate travelers here. Well, unfortunately in 1888, the Mundine Hotel, there was a great fire here. 11 of the 13 occupants at the time passed away. A very sad, tragic story that happened at this site was that the owner of the Mundine Hotel, his wife and kids all perished in the fire, and they had to restrain him from going into the fire because it was too far gone to rescue his wife and kids. So very tragic events that happened. Now, after 1888, the hotel was never rebuilt, and so on this site now, there's foreign businesses that come in place up here to in the downtown of Rockdale. Now, if we look across the streets, right over here, you can't tell again, but there was another hotel called Wolf Hotel, and on this spot, right, stood another hotel, so just adjacent to the Mundine Hotel, and it ran roughly around the same times as that. Now, it has since years ago, right, early 1900s, it was torn down, right, and now is the gazebo for where they do the Christmas tree lighting and that sort of thing. Alright, so continue with us as we go on search of some more historical markers in Rockdale. Thank you. Hi, welcome back. Right behind me we have what's called the Old City Cemetery. In 1870, this cemetery was built in order to help with the citizens of Rockdale, where citizens could be buried. There are several prominent citizens of Rockdale that are buried here. If you recall from the last part of the video, the person that built Wolf Hotel was buried here, as well as other prominent members of the Rockdale family. The Caulfields were buried here, right, as well as some other veterans, right, of the Civil War and other world wars. What's unique about this cemetery is that in the front part up here was mainly the white cemetery, and further in the back, as we will see, right, if we get back there, was the African American section of the cemetery, as well as a Jewish portion of the cemetery. There are a lot of prominent Jewish members of the society in Rockdale's early founding. The Lowensteins are one of the more well-known families. So, as we venture back to the back part of the cemetery, you can see right, the different sections of a cemetery. Thank you.
That's good.
Welcome back. As I was telling you before, during these times, uh, to show, right, well, there was a lot of diverse cultures here in Rockville, Texas, and to show some of the diversiveness, right, you have the back part of the cemetery, Old City Cemetery, that I've shown you before, and that is the Jewish cemetery. Some very prominent members of the Rockville history have been buried here. The Lowensteins, right, family that was very big in Rockville history is buried here. Other prominent members, right? You have multiple Confederate soldiers that were buried here, and one of them, interesting. We talked about the Mundine Hotel earlier, and one of the people that died, Rockville citizens that died in the Mundine Hotel, right, was Henry Goldsticker, who was also a Confederate veteran, but he died in August 9th, 1888, in a terrible fire of the Mundine Hotel. If we go back a little bit further that way, that we can't get really into the cemetery at this time, right? There you have the African American portion of the cemetery. And this cemetery is still in use today. There are several historical markers, as you can see from right here and what we saw at the very beginning. It's still in use, although it's not a prominent cemetery that people are buried at anymore, but it is still in use to today. But just to show the very diverseness of the culture of Rockville and its history. Thank you. Hi, welcome back. So what we have behind me here was once stood the Scarborough and Hicks Company building. Down here, if we move a little bit closer, what we can see on this actual spot, there was a terrible fire in 1935. And on this spot, 2 firemen passed away while trying to answer the call for that. Over here on my left, right, we also have a time capsule. Rockville, on its 100th anniversary. Rockville was founded in 1874, and in 1974 they buried a time capsule here that's going to be opened up next year during the 150th sesquicentennial anniversary. So, after Scarborough and Hicks burned down, right, it became another mercantile building, but eventually it will become the Lucy Hill Patterson Memorial Library, which is still very prominent nowadays today. So, if we get a look right down here, it's a little hard to tell, right, but this was the main street of Rockville, the main thoroughfare. And a little bit further down, right, they're rebuilding the 1895, and I really wish I could show you that building, but in 1895 Rockville built a city hall, and in the 1950s, 40s, it became a police station, and it was the house of police station for up until the late 2000 teens. And nowadays, there's a board called the Vision Historic Preservation Society that is trying to rebuild the 1895 City Hall back to its former glory. So continue with us as we go look at some other landmarks. Hi, welcome back. So, what we have here behind me is the First Baptist Church in Rockville, Texas. A lot of the first congregations in Rockville, Texas met in a dry goods store somewhere along the main street that we saw. Although at present it's difficult to attain where exactly that place was. But through the urging of several local Baptists, they decided to erect in 1881 not what we see here behind us, but another structure that housed the First Baptist Church. And it wasn't until 1972 that the present structure that we see right here was constructed and became official Rockville Baptist Church. And Rockville has a lot of very prominent churches in its community that date all the way back to the 1870s. And the Baptist Church is one of the first and foremost churches that does date back to that. So here on the same grounds that we see, Rockville fellow Christians, Baptists, right, worshipped. Next, we're going to go over to a famous author of Rockville, and probably one of the most prominent members of Rockville community, celebrity, which is George Sessions Perry. So, continue with us.
Go.
Alright, another prominent location of entertainment in Rockdale, Texas, is the K Theater behind me. In around 2004. It closed in 1962, but was open for several decades before that. It was one of two movie theaters here in Rockdale, Texas. The other was the Dixie Theater that was located along Rockdale's main roadway. So recently, the K Theater was reconstructed and have just now started showing movies here again for the community, as well as other community events such as concerts and political events as well. In fact, the recent gubernatorial candidate Beto O'Rourke, who ran in the last election in 2020, too, came here to campaign in Rockdale, Texas, showing that Rockdale, Texas is on the move up in the political arena as well as that. Now, behind me you can see there's an El Camino Real local tour route. So the El Camino Real was a route that the Native Americans as well as the Spanish and Mexicans and the Native Americans would take. Now, before the road was, obviously paved over with asphalt, this was a road that was a trail, basically, and it runs for several miles. But you can imagine, yourself in the place of some of these early Spanish conquistadors, explorers, or Native Americans as you travel along, this route. It goes out to a spot called Apache Pass, where two missions were at, as well as the Apache Indians would camp out in local springs there. Alright, thank you. Hi, welcome back again. I know I said I would be showing you the George Sessions house, which I will in just a minute. Show you another pistol here in Rockdale, Texas. The St. Joseph Episcopal Church. The church organization here in Rockdale dates back to the early parts of Rockdale, and actually the structure, the main parts of the structure that you see behind me date back all the way till 1880. It's one of the first churches here in Rockdale, Texas, still very prominent nowadays. If we look right over here across the street, what we see is the Matinee Musical Club. This is a house that was very prominent in Rockdale history. One of the first and largest clubs of its kind here. A lot of musical productions and famous, musical teachers, taught here for many years. And if we continue on, the final stop on our tour, we're going to, now it's a residential spot, but so we're not going to be able to actually go into the yard to look at it, but you can get a sense, of what it is. Now, oftentimes back decades ago, people would buy houses from Sears catalogs and other catalogs like that. And this is an example, of a house where it has a lot of very large trees. We can move further down here a little bit and maybe see a little better. But this is the home of George Sessions Perry. He's one of the most well-known people from Rockdale, Texas. He wrote for the Saturday Evening Post, prominent during World War II era, and a lot of his stories date back to his times here. In fact, his story, My Granny Van, is reference basically off the house that you see behind me. So, thank you for taking the time to tour Rockdale with me, and I hope I was able to educate you on some of the local issues that we have here. Thank you very much.